When you hear the word samurai, what do you see? You probably picture a stoic warrior in heavy horned armor, drawing a razor-sharp katana, ready to fight to the death for honor. We see them in movies, anime, and video games. But the true story of the samurai is so much more fascinating than the movies. For nearly 700 years, these warriors completely ruled Japan. They were the military, the government, and the highest social class. But they didn't start out as sword-swinging nobles, and they didn't end the way you might think. In fact, the very first samurai didn't even use swords as their main weapon. They used bows and arrows. Today, we are going to travel back in time to explore the entire history of Japan's legendary warriors. We'll look at how they started, their bloodiest era of constant civil war, how they eventually became peaceful bureaucrats, and their dramatic, tragic end. Grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's dive into the incredible history of the samurai. Our story begins a long time ago, around the late 700s, during what is called the Heian period. At this time, Japan was ruled by an emperor who lived in the capital city of Kyoto. The emperor and his nobles loved poetry, beautiful clothes, and art. They didn't really like fighting. But there was a problem. In the northern part of Japan, there were independent tribes that refused to bow to the emperor. The emperor needed an army. Instead of fighting themselves, the wealthy nobles hired local landowners in the countryside to fight for them. These local landowners were rich enough to own horses and armor. Because they served the nobles, they became known as samurai. In ancient Japanese, the word saburao simply means those who serve. Here is a major mythbuster. The earliest samurai were not swordsmen. They were horse archers. Their main weapon was the yumi, a massive asymmetrical bow. The sword was just a backup weapon if they got knocked off their horse. Over the next few hundred years, these hired warriors started to realize something important. They had all the weapons, they had all the military training. Why were they taking orders from poets and politicians in Kyoto who had never seen a battlefield? Eventually, the samurai families grew massive and powerful. By the late 1100s, two giant samurai families basically controlled the country, the Taira clan and the Minamoto clan. In 1180, these two families went to war in a brutal conflict called the Genpei War. It lasted 5 years and was fought on land and sea. In the end, the Minamoto clan crushed the Taira clan. The leader of the winning clan, Minamoto no Yoritomo, did something that changed Japanese history forever. He didn't just go back to being a servant to the emperor. In 1192, he forced the emperor to give him a brand new title, shogun. Shogun basically means supreme military dictator. From this moment on, for the next 700 years, the emperor of Japan was just a powerless mascot. The real power belonged to the shogun and his samurai. The age of the samurai had officially begun. For a while, the samurai ruled Japan with an iron fist. But in the late 1200s, they faced a terrifying threat from the outside world. Kublai Khan, the grandson of the famous Genghis Khan, ruled the massive Mongol Empire. He had just conquered China and Korea, and he looked across the ocean at Japan. He sent a message to the samurai saying, "Submit to me or be destroyed." The samurai's response? They executed the messengers. In 1274, the Mongols attacked, and the samurai were in for a rude awakening. The samurai were used to fighting one-on-one duels. A samurai would ride out, shout his family name, and look for a single opponent. The Mongols didn't care about that. They fought in massive, coordinated groups using poison arrows and explosive gunpowder bombs, things the Japanese had never seen. The samurai were pushed back to the beaches, but just as the Mongols were about to win, a massive typhoon swept in from the ocean. It smashed the Mongol ships to pieces, drowning thousands of soldiers. The survivors fled. 7 years later, in 1281, the Mongols tried again with an even bigger army. And incredibly, a second typhoon hit, destroying the Mongol fleet again. The Japanese called these lucky storms kamikaze, which means divine wind, believing the gods were protecting Japan. You'd think the samurai would be thrilled, right? They won. But actually, this victory ruined them. Usually, when samurai fought a war, the winner would take the loser's land and give it to his soldiers as a reward. But you can't take land from the bottom of the ocean. The samurai had spent all their money defending the country, and the shogun had no rewards to give them. The samurai grew angry and broke. They eventually rebelled, overthrew the shogun, and Japan shattered into pieces. This led to the darkest, most famous chapter of samurai history. Welcome to the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states. From 1466 to 1600, Japan was locked in a brutal, non-stop civil war. There was no central government. Japan was divided into dozens of small territories, each ruled by a daimyo called a warlord. Every daimyo wanted to conquer the others and become the next shogun. This is the era that inspires all the movies, video games, and anime. It was a time of chaos, betrayal, and massive battles. During this time, the rules for being a samurai changed completely. Before, you had to be born into a noble family, but during this century of war, warlords needed bodies. If you were a poor peasant farmer but you were good with a spear, you could join an army, prove yourself in battle, and become a samurai. This was also the golden age of the shinobi, or as we call them today, ninjas. While samurai fought openly on the battlefield, warlords hired ninjas to spy, sabotage, and assassinate enemies in the dark. But the biggest game changer happened in 1543. A Portuguese trading ship was blown off course and landed in Japan. The sailors had something the samurai had never seen: matchlock muskets, guns. The Japanese immediately copied the design. Within just a few decades, Japanese armies were using more guns than any army in Europe. The bow and arrow were out. The sword was strictly for close combat. Guns and long spears ruled the battlefield. Out of all this chaos, 3 legendary men emerged one after another to finally reunite Japan. They're known as the 3 unifiers. 1. Oda Nobunaga, a ruthless, brilliant tactician who loved using guns. He conquered half of Japan before he was betrayed by his own general and forced to commit seppuku, ritual suicide. 2. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a peasant who started as Nobunaga's sandal bearer. He rose through the ranks, took over after Nobunaga died, and finished unifying Japan. 3. Tokugawa Ieyasu, a patient, brilliant warlord. After Hideyoshi died, Tokugawa won the massive Battle of Sekigahara in the year 1600. Tokugawa made himself the new shogun. He moved the capital to a small fishing village called Edo, which we now know today as Tokyo. He locked down Japan, closed Japan's borders to the outside world, and started a period of peace that would last for over 250 years. But this raised a huge question. What happens to a class of warriors when there is no more war? During the Edo period, from 1600 to 1868, Japan experienced a long, unbroken peace. For the samurai, this was both a blessing and a curse. The shogun made strict new rules. First, he froze the social classes. If you were born a farmer, you died a farmer. If you were born a samurai, you were a samurai forever. Only samurai were legally allowed to carry 2 swords, the long katana and the short wakizashi. This pair of swords was called the daisho, and it was the ultimate symbol of their rank. But there was no one to fight, so the samurai had to find new jobs. They slowly transformed from bloodthirsty warriors into highly educated bureaucrats, government officials, tax collectors, and scholars. They studied literature, poetry, and tea ceremonies. It was actually during this peaceful time that the famous Code of the Samurai, Bushido, or the Way of the Warrior, was finally written down. When samurai were actually fighting in the wars of the past, they were practical. They used sneak attacks, guns, and whatever it took to win. But during the peaceful Edo period, they started to romanticize their past. They wrote books about how a true samurai should behave, focusing on absolute loyalty to their master, honor, and fearlessness in the face of death. But not all samurai had cushy government jobs. If a samurai's master died, or if his clan was shut down by the shogun, he became a ronin, a masterless samurai. Without a master, they had no income. Many ronin became poor wanderers, working as bodyguards, mercenaries, or sometimes even bandits. For 250 years, the samurai lived like this, an elite upper class of sword-carrying administrators in an isolated, peaceful country. But the world outside Japan was changing fast, and the modern world was about to knock on Japan's door, literally. In 1853, an American fleet of steam-powered warships commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Tokyo Bay. They had massive cannons. Perry delivered a message from the US president: "Open your country to trade or else." The samurai were terrified. They had been isolated for over 2 centuries. They still fought with swords and antique matchlock guns. They realized that if they went to war with the West, Japan would be colonized, just like other parts of Asia. This sparked a massive crisis. The samurai realized the shogun was too weak to protect them. So in 1868, a group of powerful samurai actually overthrew the shogun and gave power back to the emperor in an event called the Meiji Restoration. They wanted to modernize Japan as fast as possible to protect it from Western powers. They built railways, telegraph lines, and modern factories. But to create a modern nation, the leaders realized they had to destroy the old social system, and that meant getting rid of the samurai class. The government passed laws banning the samurai from wearing their swords in public. They took away the samurai's government salaries. They created a modern, Western-style army made of drafted peasants. The samurai were officially obsolete. Many samurai were furious. They had given up everything to put the emperor back in power, and now their entire identity was being erased. This anger boiled over in 1877 during the Satsuma Rebellion. A legendary samurai named Saigo Takamori led thousands of traditional samurai in a final doomed rebellion against the new modern imperial army. This true story loosely inspired the Tom Cruise movie The Last Samurai. Despite fighting bravely with swords and rifles, the samurai were outnumbered and outgunned by modern artillery and Gatling guns. Saigo Takamori died in battle, marking the tragic, bloody end of the samurai class. The samurai class was abolished over 150 years ago, but their spirit never really left Japan. You can still see the legacy of the samurai in modern Japanese culture. The martial arts they invented, like kendo and judo, are practiced worldwide. Their deep values of respect, discipline, loyalty, and taking pride in one's work are still the foundation of modern Japanese society. The samurai started as humble farmers with bows, became the absolute masters of the country, fought through a century of blood and fire, transformed into peaceful scholars, and finally sacrificed their own existence to allow Japan to enter the modern world. It is one of the greatest stories in human history.